Under the cold glow of a dying sun, the flagship Varric's Pride drifted in orbit above the burning human colony. Its massive hull, bristling with weapons, glimmered faintly in the light of the fires below. Admiral Zyler leaned back in his command chair, talons tapping idly against the armrest, the gesture one of boredom rather than menace. His vertical pupils narrowed as he studied the planet's surface on the main display, human cities collapsing under plasma fire, their defenses crumbling in waves of heat and light. Another colony erased. Another planet stripped bare. It barely stirred his interest anymore. Humans, to him, were an infestation. A rapidly spreading, tragically ambitious species whose colonies appeared on backwater moons and marginal worlds like fungus after rain. The Empire dealt with such things swiftly and decisively. Yet Zyler harbored no hatred for them. They were beneath hatred. He watched the destruction below the way one might watch insects scatter after appending a nest, curious, briefly entertained, then done. The bridge crew moved efficiently, their scales glittering under the dim blue lights. Officers reported strike confirmations, shield statuses, fleet movements, each voice precise, respectful, never trembling. No one feared the humans. Why should they? Humanity had been a minor nuisance in the outer spiral for decades, nipping at trade routes, expanding too quickly, making noise about sovereignty and independence as though any of it mattered. The Empire was old when their sun was still a cloud of dust. "Admiral," murmured his second-in-command, a lean, sharp-eyed officer named Vorin. "Scans confirm 0 organized resistance remaining. Shall I give the order to withdraw?" Zyler considered. The fires below still burned, painting the night side of the planet in a faint orange glow. "No," he said at last, voice calm, faintly amused. "Level the remaining settlements. Leave nothing functional behind. Let them rebuild from dust if they wish to waste the effort." Vorin bowed slightly and relayed the order. The bridge trembled faintly as another wave of plasma torpedoes fell toward the surface. Zyler allowed himself a thin smile. There was no thrill in this victory, not anymore. Humanity, for all its noise, had proven predictable. Their weapons were crude, their defenses static, their ships laughable. Even their courage seemed poorly distributed, bursts of defiance before inevitable surrender. Primitive, impulsive, undisciplined. He had once heard a fellow admiral call them tool-using primates with delusions of grandeur. He found the phrase accurate enough. Reports flowed in as the last human signals went silent. Another planet reduced to rubble. Another Imperial victory certain enough to be forgotten by tomorrow's fleet logs. But then came the anomaly. "Admiral," Vorin said again, but his voice this time carried a faint edge. "Long-range sensors detect transmissions from the Sol system. Earth itself." Zyler turned one eye toward him. "Their homeworld?" "Yes, sir. It appears they are aware of the attack." Zyler flicked his claws dismissively. "Let them be aware. Fear travels faster than plasma. Perhaps they will beg, as others have." Yet Vorin hesitated, and that drew the Admiral's full attention. "Sir," he said carefully, "there is movement in the system. Civilian transports evacuating, yes, but also deployments. Organized deployments. Fleet patterns." Zyler's pupils narrowed further. "They have no fleet." "Apparently," Vorin said, "they do." The Admiral studied the tactical feed in silence. "Dozens, no. Hundreds of human ships fanning out from Earth orbit. Not attacking, not fleeing, simply positioning. Defensive lines forming around the planet, like a shell." He watched them with a faint curl of amusement at first. The arrogance. The futility. "Sir," another officer called out, "they are broadcasting." "On screen," Zyler ordered. The main display flickered, resolving into the image of a human, male, middle-aged, wearing the dark uniform of some planetary defense force. His face was calm, almost unnervingly so, given the fires consuming his colonies. When he spoke, his voice carried no anger, no fear. Only cold clarity. "To the forces orbiting our world," he said, "you have made a grave mistake." Zyler chuckled softly. They issue threats now. The human continued, unshaken. Leave Earth's orbit immediately. This is your only warning. The bridge fell silent for a moment. Then the officers glanced toward their admiral, waiting for the inevitable amusement, the command to fire, the dismissal of yet another futile display of human pride. Xyler smiled thinly. "Transmit our response," he said. "Let them know the Empire does not negotiate with savages." The human on screen seemed to watch him directly, as though hearing his thoughts. Then the transmission ended without further words. The alien officers exchanged glances. It was nothing. Humans had postured before dying plenty of times. Yet something about the calmness of it lingered, faint as the chill before a storm. Minutes later, the first Imperial frigate over the planet's southern hemisphere reported sudden sensor malfunctions. Their targeting systems went blind. Shields fluctuated. Within seconds, they were gone. Vanished from all readings, no explosion, no distress call. Just gone. The bridge filled with quiet murmurs. Xyler ordered a replacement squadron to investigate. Half of them disappeared the same way. Vorin leaned closer. "Sir, this is not standard human technology." "Coincidence," Xyler snapped, though his tail flicked once, betraying irritation. But the anomalies spread. Communication relays failed across the fleet. Orbital drones went offline. Navigation grids scrambled themselves into gibberish. And through it all, Earth sat silent below, no further threats, no frantic pleas for mercy. It was as though they were waiting. Xyler rose from his chair slowly, eyes narrowing at the display of Earth's surface. Something about the stillness beneath the chaos unsettled him. He had destroyed dozens of worlds, yet none had ever gone this quiet before fighting back. "Admiral," Vorin said softly, "shall we withdraw?" Xyler considered the notion and dismissed it immediately. The Empire did not retreat from primitives with lucky tricks. Whatever weapons Earth had hidden, they would burn like all the rest. "Deploy the main fleet," he ordered instead. "Crush their defenses. Leave nothing standing." The officers moved to obey. Yet under the efficient motions of the bridge crew ran a thin current of unease, like cracks spiderwebbing through glass. The humans had spoken only once. They had not begged. They had not blustered. They had only warned. And somewhere deep in Admiral Xyler's instincts, dulled by centuries of easy victories, a quiet thought whispered what he refused to say aloud. What if they were not bluffing? The fleet descended toward Earth, weapons primed, engines burning bright. But in the shadows above the planet, far beyond visible sensors, something vast and silent shifted into position. The first hints of humanity's true power waited there, unseen, ready to answer the arrogance of empires with the cold precision of calculated wrath. And when it came, there would be no mistaking it for desperation. It would look like judgment. The first strike came without sound. One moment, the Imperial cruiser Drethvar glided over Earth's upper atmosphere, sensors sweeping for human defense grids. The next, a lance of light carved through its hull so cleanly the crew never had time to scream. The ship broke apart in perfect silence, fragments scattering across the stratosphere, its reactor imploding like a dying star. On the Varric's Pride, Admiral Xyler stood frozen, eyes narrowing as the tactical display flared with alerts. One ship gone. Then another. No enemy signatures detected. No visible firing platforms. Just sudden annihilation, swift, surgical, impossible. "Where is it coming from?" Xyler snapped. His officers scrambled through readouts, sensors, anything that might explain what had just happened. "Admiral, we can't trace the origin. No emissions, no heat blooms. It's as if the attacks came from nowhere." "Nothing comes from nowhere," Xyler hissed, though a faint edge crept into his voice. Across the bridge, Vorin studied the flickering icons where their ships had been seconds earlier. The humans weren't responding to hails. No threats, no boasts, no demands. Just invisible precision strikes, as though the planet itself had grown claws. And then Earth spoke again. A voice transmitted across all channels, cold and measured. The same man as before, unshaken, deliberate. "You have ignored our warning," he said. Now you will understand what that means. Xyler felt his jaw tighten. The voice carried no rage, no triumph. That calmness unnerved him more than any shouting could have. Another 3 ships vanished before his eyes. The attacks were not random. They were selecting targets, the command vessels first, cutting the fleet's coordination apart like a surgeon severing nerves. "Admiral," Vorin said softly, "this is organized." Xyler glared at the display, unwilling to admit what his instinct screamed. He had studied war for centuries, commanded fleets across half the spiral arm. Yet he had never seen an enemy fight like this. Silent, precise, invisible. The humans weren't improvising. They had planned for this. As the realization took shape, a transmission crackled in from the outer fleet. A captain's voice, ragged with panic. "Sir, unknown vessels emerging at the edge of the system. Multiple signatures. Wait, they're human, but we have no record." Static. Then nothing. On the main display, new contacts appeared. Not the lumbering defense craft Imperial intelligence had catalogued, but sleek, angular warships sliding from the darkness beyond Pluto's orbit, engines cold until the moment they attacked. They didn't charge blindly. They didn't broadcast demands. They advanced with chilling coordination, cutting off retreat vectors, forcing the Imperial fleet inward toward Earth, like hunters closing a trap. Xyler stared at them, realization coiling slowly through his mind. These were not frontier militia ships. Not the panicked scrappers the Empire had crushed for decades. These vessels moved with purpose, with discipline, with preparation. "Admiral," Vorin said carefully, "this was not a desperate defense. They let us strike first." The truth settled over the bridge like falling ash. The scattered colonies, the weak outer defenses, the appearance of disorganization, none of it had been weakness. It had been bait. Xyler thought back to the first transmission. "You should have left Earth alone." He felt the faintest chill trace his spine. "Signal the War Council," he ordered sharply. "Inform them this campaign has changed character." Even as he spoke, his tactical screens filled with more red. Human ships emerging from concealed positions around Earth's orbit, orbital platforms powering up weapons Imperial scans had dismissed as derelict or primitive. Defense grids the Empire never knew existed came alive all at once, locking onto Imperial ships with terrifying precision. The trap snapped shut. But even as the battle turned, Xyler's mind focused not on the losses, but on the humans themselves. Their silence disturbed him. Most species screamed defiance when cornered. Humanity fought like they were simply following steps long rehearsed. "Pull back to high orbit," he ordered at last. "Reform the fleet. I want prisoners taken, someone who can explain where they acquired this technology." Yet even as he spoke, he knew no prisoners would be taken. The human ships gave no opportunity for boarding, no chance for capture. They killed without hesitation, then vanished into stealth fields Imperial science barely comprehended. At last, with half the fleet crippled, the humans spoke again. Their commander appeared once more on the main display, the same calm figure, eyes cold, uniform marked with no rank Xyler recognized. "You came here thinking we were primitive," the man said. "That was your first mistake." Xyler's tail lashed once behind him. "You dare threaten the Empire?" "No," the human replied evenly. "We promise you something. This ends now, one way or another." Then the transmission cut off, leaving only the cold light of Earth on the screen. For the first time in his long career, Admiral Xyler felt something unfamiliar press against his composure. Not anger, not even hatred. It was the first thin edge of fear. Because he now understood the truth the War Council had refused to see. The humans had been waiting for this, and they were only getting started. Admiral Xyler had fought wars across 3 spiral arms, crushed rebellions before they began, reduced proud civilizations to ash. Yet nothing in his centuries of campaigns prepared him for what unfolded now across the void. The human counterattack did not come with banners or boasts. It came as shadows moving through darkness, strikes delivered with surgical precision, entire flotillas erased before they could even fire. The Imperial fleet, once a wall of firepower stretching across the stars, now reeled like a wounded beast, lashing out blindly while unseen predators closed in. On the Varric's Pride, Xyler stood rigid, forcing his voice to remain calm even as reports poured in. Shipyards burned in distant systems, supply convoys ambushed by human fleets emerging from wormholes the Empire didn't even know existed. They were everywhere and nowhere, advancing with terrifying coordination. Another shipyard destroyed, Admiral Vorin reported, his usual composure fraying at the edges. Third one this cycle. They're severing every supply line before we can regroup. Xyler's talons scraped lightly against the armrest of his command chair. It was impossible. The humans lacked the industry, the science, the unity for this scale of war. Or so the Empire's intelligence had claimed. Yet here they were, dismantling centuries of imperial dominance piece by piece. The tactical feed bloomed with red as yet another squadron winked out. Xyler leaned forward slowly. Summon the War Council. Now. Across the fleet's encrypted channels, the Empire's admirals and ministers appeared in ghostly projections, faces tight with frustration and disbelief. Some demanded immediate counterstrikes. Others insisted the humans must have secret allies, some hidden power feeding them technology. A few, the older ones who had studied humanity's violent history, urged caution, perhaps even negotiation. Xyler listened to the clamor until his patience snapped. Enough, he said, voice low but carrying like a blade drawn across stone. We are not dealing with frightened colonists. This is a coordinated military power. Underestimating them further will cost us the Empire itself. A minister sneered. They're savages with scavenged weapons. Savages? Xyler cut him off sharply. Savages do not deploy fleets across 10 systems simultaneously. Savages do not fight with this level of precision. They set a trap for us at their home world, and we walked into it blind. Silence followed. For the first time since the campaign began, some of them looked afraid. When the council dissolved in uneasy quiet, Xyler remained alone on the bridge. He called up human records, fragments of history collected by Imperial intelligence but long ignored as irrelevant. The images filled the screen in cold succession. Trenches of the First World War, cities burning in the Second, mushroom clouds blooming over deserts, fleets of bombers darkening the skies. Entire continents scarred by conflicts waged not for survival, but ideology, pride, vengeance. Xyler watched in silence, his throat tight. The humans had been doing this to each other while their species was still bound to a single planet. Entire generations raised amid fire and ruin, and they had endured, rebuilt, turned war into something woven through their history like iron through stone. They hadn't feared extinction. They had learned from it. And now that terrible inheritance had turned outward. Vorin approached quietly. Admiral, perhaps we should advise withdrawal before. No, Xyler said softly, eyes still on the footage. Cities collapsing under artillery fire. Soldiers charging through mud thick with blood. Civilians digging through rubble for survivors. And always rebuilding afterward. He finally understood what unsettled him so deeply about the humans. They were not reckless. They were not desperate. They were practiced. And that made them far more dangerous than any enemy the Empire had ever faced. The next wave of human attacks came hours later. Not just in Seoul, but across the Empire's borders. Wormholes tearing open above industrial worlds, autonomous fleets targeting power grids, weapons platforms hacked and turned against their own defenses. It was too coordinated for panic, too measured for vengeance. This was strategy. Xyler issued counterorders, but the humans stayed 3 steps ahead. For every defensive line the Empire formed, the humans bypassed it. For every fortress world fortified, 3 more fell silent under precision orbital strikes. At last came the transmission no one on the Varric's Pride wanted to hear. Admiral, a communications officer said tightly, the capital requests immediate reinforcements. Human fleets have entered the home system. The bridge went utterly silent. Xyler felt the weight of that report settle across his shoulders. No enemy fleet had threatened the imperial capital in generations. Its defenses were legendary. Entire moons converted into weapons platforms, fleets stationed permanently in orbit. Yet the humans advanced anyway. Not recklessly, not loudly, simply, inevitably. Xyler watched the tactical feed as red bloomed across the home system's outer defenses. One by one, icons flickered and died. He thought of the human commander's calm voice. This ends now. One way or another. For centuries, the Empire had crushed defiance wherever it rose. They had believed fear would always keep their dominion intact. But fear only worked on those unwilling to pay the cost of defiance. The humans, it seemed, had already counted that cost generations ago. Vorin approached again, voice low. Admiral, if the capital falls, the Empire fractures. Civil wars, revolts, it will all come apart. Xyler said nothing. He watched the silent red blooms spreading across the map of his civilization and felt something colder than anger take root in his chest. The humans had no need to conquer. They didn't need to burn every world or slaughter every citizen. They were dismantling the Empire's power piece by piece until nothing remained but compliance or surrender. The realization settled like ice through his veins. This war was already lost, and the humans knew it. The Imperial capital burned against the black of space like a dying star. Planetary shields that had held firm for centuries now floated in orbit as fractured wreckage, their shattered fragments glinting with cold firelight. Human fleets surrounded the system in disciplined silence, forming a noose that neither tightened nor loosened, simply existing with the inevitability of gravity itself. On the Varix Pride, Admiral Xyler watched the destruction unfold with a stillness born not of composure, but of exhaustion. He had spent his entire life believing the Empire eternal, its fleets invincible, its dominion unquestioned. Now he could not deny the simple truth flickering across his displays. The Empire was finished. Not only its armies, but its aura of control, the myth of its permanence, burned away in weeks by a species the Council had dismissed as primitives. A transmission request pulsed across the main display. Xyler allowed it through. The same human commander appeared, the one whose voice had haunted every defeat. Calm eyes, even tone, the weight of inevitability behind every word. Admiral Xyler, the man said, neither gloating nor condemning, the capital is surrounded. Your fleets are broken. Your leadership is silent. We request your surrender to prevent further loss of life. Request, not demand, not threat. Xyler studied the man's expression. There was no hatred there, no triumph. The humans weren't reveling in victory. They treated it like an unpleasant necessity, as though conquest bored them. Vorin stepped beside Xyler, voice low. Admiral, if we refuse, they will finish it. We have nothing left. The bridge crew watched their leader, silent, waiting. Once, they had feared him. Now they feared something larger, something none of them could name, but all of them felt. Xyler straightened slowly, the movement deliberate. Open channel, he said. His own voice surprised him with its steadiness. When he spoke, it was to the human commander. If I surrender, what becomes of my people? They live, the man replied simply. Under new terms. No slavery. No subjugation. No empires built on fear. The age of conquest ends here. The words felt strange, almost absurd, yet Xyler heard no deception in them. The humans had no interest in replacing one tyranny with another. They wanted something different, something the Empire, in all its centuries, had never understood. He exhaled slowly, tasting ash in the recycled air. Then it seems, he said at last, I have no choice. Choice, the human said evenly, is exactly what you have. Surrender willingly, and we rebuild together. Refuse, and history ends you here. For a long moment, the bridge remained silent, but for the hum of failing systems. Then Admiral Xyler gave the only order left to him. Transmit surrender, he said. Across the fleet, weapons powered down. Engines cooled. One by one, the remnants of Imperial command signaled compliance. But surrender did not feel like defeat. Not in the old sense. It felt like a threshold crossed, the closing of one age and the reluctant birth of another. The human fleets moved with mechanical precision, disarming defenses, securing orbitals, but never firing on helpless ships. They offered medical aid to wounded crews. They landed troops without cruelty or mockery. The professionalism unsettled Xyler more than vengeance would have. Within days, imperial communications filled with debates among surviving governors, admirals, ministers. Some demanded rebellion, swearing the empire would rise again. Most remained silent, broken by the scale of what had happened. The humans didn't even respond to the threats. They simply dismantled every weapon, every fleet yard, every supply chain until resistance became not only impossible, but irrelevant. Xyler attended the first meeting between human envoys and the remnants of the Imperial Council. He expected demands, humiliation, perhaps even executions. Instead, the humans presented terms of governance, regional autonomy, trade agreements, disarmament protocols. Not as conquerors dictating law, but as negotiators shaping something new. It made no sense. Every empire Xyler had ever known ruled through fear or loyalty. The humans ruled through neither. They didn't seem interested in ruling at all, only in ensuring no one repeated the mistakes that had brought the galaxy to this moment. One evening, if the concept of evening meant anything on a warship drifting above a burning capital, Xyler stood alone in the observation deck, watching his world turn slowly below. Vorin approached but didn't speak, waiting beside him in silence. They didn't want this war, Xyler said finally. It wasn't a question. Vorin shook his head.
No.
But they ended at the moment it began. Xyler thought of the footage he had seen, Earth's wars, its history soaked in fire and blood. A species forged in conflict, tempered by loss, yet never extinguished. The Council had mistaken that history for weakness, as though constant war meant chaos rather than resilience. They fight like people who learned long ago, Xyler murmured, that survival has no mercy in it. The human commander joined them then, silent until he reached the viewport. His presence carried no triumph, no arrogance, only a weariness Xyler recognized too well. It's over, the man said quietly. Xyler looked at him, studying the face of the enemy who had dismantled an empire without ever raising his voice. For you, the admiral said, or for all of us? The man's eyes shifted to the burning capital below.
For conquest, he said at last.
Not for what comes next. What does come next? Vorin asked. The human was silent a long time before answering. Something better. Or worse. That depends on everyone still standing. Days later, the first joint council formed aboard a neutral station, human envoys, alien governors, surviving admirals. No oaths of loyalty. No pledges of empire. Only agreements. Trade, defense, reconstruction. A galaxy uniting not from trust or friendship, but from the memory of how quickly everything had almost ended. When Admiral Xyler signed the accords, he felt no pride, no humiliation. Only the sense of standing at the edge of history, watching one world die so another could begin. As he left the chamber, he passed the human commander once more. The man inclined his head slightly, not as victor to defeated, but as soldier to soldier. Xyler returned the gesture. Neither spoke. Above them, fleets once built for conquest now patrolled for peace, weapons silent, engines cold, waiting for a future none of them could yet imagine. And for the first time since the war began, Admiral Xyler wondered if the humans feared that future as much as he did.